Welcome to my basic to moderate Disc Priest healing guide. In this I'll go over the basics, what I think of the spells, talents that you can use as a starter and then progress to further, and the kind of ways you heal and make the most out of all your atonements through doing damage. Basically, that's how you heal as a Disc Priest. So we'll start with the spells. Well, first off, with Shadow Fiend, which is a weird place to start, but yeah, it is our longest cooldown. It's 3 minutes, and this thing will hit the target, and its damage attacks will then heal everybody that has atonement on them. This thing is like a mini trank, really. It's a little overkill sometimes. If you're doing this with like other abilities, just smiting, and you've got a Shadow Fiend out, and you've got some sort of damage buff as well, it's actually more powerful than a trank. And frankly, is overkill most of the time. I think the amount of healing that can come out of that is probably the thing I forget to use the most. Sometimes I'm a bit careful about when to use it, but it's very handy if you've got a lot of healing to do and you've got to move, because then all you can do is use that and you can penance, and that's pretty much all you can do on the move. But if you've got atonements set up on everybody in time before you're having to do those movements, those two things will sort out most problems. Next up, let's go to penance itself. Penance it feels like it should be more powerful than it is. It's one of the few spells that's not getting an nerf to its damage in 8.1, so hopefully it will be a little bit more useful. But it still has its niche uses, and it is worth using during high atonements for sure. Particularly if you've got to move, because it's castable on the move, and very useful if you get Power of the Dark Side proc, which you'll notice around your character because it'll get this purple sort of bracket. So it's definitely, which increases its damage and thus increases its healing. Power word Radiance. Now this is the thing you really need to track carefully, which I have right here. It's like one of the main three. It is a quick way to spread atonements out on multiple targets, up to 5, in a very quick, speedy way. It's relatively short cast, I suppose. It's a mana efficient for the amount of atonements it throws out there, really. Even though it doesn't do a lot of healing, but you know the healing comes from the atonements. It's unfortunately the atonements only last 60% as long as they would normally, or 70% as long if you've got an Azerite trait, which I've only just got myself recently. The thing to keep in mind with it is that when you cast it, it has a 20-second cooldown per charge. Thus, this is going to count all the way down to 0 until I get it back. If I cast this second charge, it's still having to count down the original cooldown before it'll even start recharging the second one. So if you do both of these at the same time, it's 40 seconds before you get both charges back. So it's something to keep in mind if you've got to prepare ahead of time before a big hit. You might not want to use both these charges, or even one of these charges. But if you've got a while before some damage hits and a few people take some damage, it's worth throwing Power Word Radiance on them quickly and doing some smiting, and that will be good quality healing, really. Power Word Shield. Power Word Shield should never be spammed. At most, I put it on the tanks when they're at top, or on anybody else I predict is going to take some damage. An individual. But really, if somebody's already taken some damage, you should cast Shadow Mend on them as a way to get atonements. Just like a flash heal in its speed. I'll come to Shadow Mend a bit more later. It's very mana inefficient as shielding. The only time it's worth spamming is when you've got Rapture. And I'll come to Rapture now, I guess. Rapture's like a really powerful raid cooldown, you do it less than 15 seconds before the big hit. So shields will only last 15 seconds. You do not want to waste them as much as possible. And obviously shields apply atonement. So you're applying atonement, a 200% shield to usually about 10 people. Got heroism or a haste buff of some kind, you might get it to 12 or 13 people. And it's really powerful tool. And on a 1 minute 30 cooldown, it's something you base your entire high ramp atonement healing around with that and Power Word Radiance. Shadow Word Pain. Actually, let's do Shadow Mend. Shadow Mend is, like I said, a flash shield. It does have a damage portion attached to it, but usually it doesn't matter. It's small, and actually is any damage that person takes after Shadow Mend's been applied counts as this damage. So it usually causes very little damage from the spell itself, and it's just worth using. I wouldn't even think about the damage portion of it like it exists. It's really not worth worrying about too much. Shadow Word Pain is your dot, and thus if you have an atonement on somebody, it will actually end up being a hot. More atonements you have out there, the more hots are running. If you dot multiple targets now, which is really not worth spending all your global cooldowns doing that, but you can do it. 1 or 2 is not unheard of. It's not, then more hots will be a double hot, but you're better off trying to get more atonements out there with just 1 dot on your targets and trying to dot loads of targets. And finally, Smite. Smite is cheap, efficient heal. It doesn't heal for a lot, but if you've got a ton of atonements out, it's producing a lot of healing over the entire raid for a very little mana. So it is a very good spell. Not unsurprising, it's getting another nerf in 8.1. It's the second one, and it'll still be Mr. Efficient. And that's the basic spells. So now on to talents, and this will be the easy talent setup that reduces the amount of spells you're going to have to mess around with, and will hopefully give you most of the Disc Priest without actually overcomplicating it for a starter player. So Castigation is terrible, don't ever pick it. Best ones in these tier are Twist of Fate and Schism, but Schism is just another spell that to add. You can work your way up to this one. Twist of Fate is when somebody drops below 35% health, you get a 20% damage and healing buff. This is actually worth taking in 5-mans, particularly Mythic Plus, where it'll help just your basic Shadow Mend as well, rather than just your atonements, like Schism does. Worth taking. Keep an eye on the uptime. Sometimes this is worth taking over Schism on progress stuff, but you want to have a 40% uptime really, because you're not in control of it. With Schism you are, but it's there. It's easy. You don't have to think about it too much. It just remember that you're not in control, and with Disc, if you really want to get the most out of it, you need to be actually in control of when you're doing your burst damage, and which equals burst healing. Shield Discipline is pretty good mana output, but it's really something you should not aim for. You want to aim for additional damage abilities. On a basic level, Mindbender is good. It actually can be good taking over Solace in general. If you got damage coming in every minute, it doesn't give you as much mana back though as Power Word Solace. assuming you're using Solace correctly. But it's a minute cooldown, and Solace is yet another ability you're going to have to track. So it's strong. It's not that much weaker than Solace. I don't believe, and I should probably use it more, even though I don't. Yeah, that's the one to go for. Sins of the Many is pretty much the default on this row, and it's basically a damage buff on your lower tome. You do more damage on your lower atonements, and as you get more atonements out, this decreases the amount of damage you're outputting. So it's real just basic. I won't think about it too much. Purge of the Wicked is the easy way to go here. It makes your dots, Shadow Word Pain, become this. It means it lasts longer. It does like 10% more healing. And if you penance the target that it's on, it will spread to another target. So it's actually, on some fights, it's worth using if you can cleave. So Zul, I used this over Halo because I didn't want to break CCs as well. It was another worry with Halo, and I was pretty pleased with the results for that. So it's not a bad way to go, but it's on most fights not the most optimal. Halo would be. And last tier, 5-man's lenience for sure, and the occasional fight in raids like Fetid, I would use this just because of the high spiky damage. I used it to help keep the tanks alive, I remember, when we were progressing Fetid. But generally speaking, evangelism, you should get used to using this. It's a way for you to extend all your atonements out another 6 seconds. Its cooldown lines up pretty nicely with Rapture as well, so that generally you pair them up. But there's the odd fight. Vectors comes to mind where you stagger one then the other. But on an easy mode sort of level, basic way, just pair Rapture and Evangelism up together, and you're off to do a hell of a lot of healing over the next 15 seconds. And that's the basic talents. Right, the more advanced talents. Schism. Schisms are like a damage attack like Smite and Penance, and you do this just after you've got all your atonements out. You Schism, it gives you a damage buff, and which obviously equals a healing buff for the next 9 seconds. And you're in control of this, unlike Twisted Fate. But it is yet another thing to weave in there. And you're in control, which is the nice thing about it. It also pairs up very nice with Power Word Solace, which is just yet another bit of extra burst damage, plus gets your mana back. But you need to try and use this on cooldown as much as possible. You won't. There'll be times when you're trying to get atonement out on everybody, and you just never will have time to do this because of all the globals. You have such a small, narrow window with getting atonements out on like a 20-man group that this becomes more difficult, and you also want to save it for when you use Schism. So sometimes you have to make sacrifices. This row again, you go with Sins really. Shadow Covenant niche can be useful to just pop people up every now and again, but I've seen some pretty nice results of it on Gahoo, but I would generally stay away from it. It can be good in 5-mans as well, if it's like bursting Grievous type week, I think. But again, you have to be careful how you use it, because it leaves an absorption shell on it that absorbs healing, which is a lot lower than the actual healing it does. Equals weight sometimes can be useful niche wise. Halo, fantastic. Kind of have to be careful not you bugger up CC, but it pairs up really nicely with a lot of abilities. It does work with Schism, the damage part of it, and obviously if it damages target with Schism on it, it does bonus healing to all the people with Atonement on, so plus its normal healing effect, and then Evangelism, of course. Quick mention about Luna's Barrier. It's really niche how useful that is. If you don't need Evangelism, you don't need Leniency, then yeah, sure. But frankly, it's mainly used for just cheesing in Elethor, just having fun. And that's the main talents. So now to Disc Priest Healing playstyle, and I'll talk about downtime and then the different levels of ramp up, or at least that's what I call it anyway. And that's ramp up is basically greater outputs of healing through Atonement. So downtime, you're basically just you're putting a shield on the tank, or shadow mending a tank or two, depending on how low their health is. If they've taken like half health, then you shadow mend them. If they're pretty close to the top of health, you just shield them. And then you shadow mend anybody else that takes damage, spot heal. That's downtime basically, and just smite away in between that, throw out Solace. You might Schism maybe, or Penance when you're going to move, things like that. But it's pretty chill at that point. At that point, you're starting to figure out, looking at your timers and trying to figure out when your full ramp up will be and when your partial ramp up will be. Now I'm going to talk about full ramp up first, because full ramp up decides whether you ever partial ramp up, or when or how much of a partial ramp up you do. Full ramp up is when you have Rapture and Evangelism available, and they're a 1.5-minute cooldown. And you'll also make sure you've got things like Halo and Schism ready for those as well. Shadow Fiend, if possible, but if you don't, you don't. There's a 3-minute cooldown on Shadow Fiend, unless you're doing the minute one and then you use it. What you look for is what's going to be the biggest cause of damage on the raid that you can predict, and that's when you target the full, and that takes precedence over everything. Ramp up is when you slowly increase your atonement. Your healing will increase until it's at its maximum. You hit Evangelism, and you've got a large amount of atonements running, and you just go ham with damage. You're at maximum ramp and maximum healing. The partial ramp up is when you really only use Radiance once or twice, and only uses it twice if you're a good 40 seconds away from a full ramp up. But you can often fit in these partial ramp ups to help out the other healers, and that's the way you make your healing a little less spiky. And again, it's just like a small. The only difference between a partial and a full ramp up is the partial doesn't have major cooldowns. You can use Schism though. It's that's just short enough. It's like 24 seconds to use. In the end, figure out when you're going to full ramp up. Worry about partial ramp ups as you get used to figuring out when that big hit's coming in and when you're going to do your big healing output. Later on, you can then start weaving in the partial ones as well. I will now do a few videos where I'll talk over boss kills and what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it, and hopefully the way you have to think about Disc will sink in and help. Hopefully. Enjoy. So first we have Fetid HC, and it's a bit of a ninja pool, which is not ideal for Discs since you want to actually prep for stuff. So you have to work pretty much on the fly here, getting into position, and start ramp almost straight away. The stomp's coming really fast. So you'll never have a ramp up for everything, but you do get there in pretty quick. 2 evangelisms. Could attempt to get a schism off before the stomp, but I don't manage it here. I'm out of range of a lot of people, so I run in penancing, so I can get the halo off. There you go. The thing to really track on this is the darkness. Disc is pretty good on this, just because the darkness thing requires you to move. Obviously, darkness is a lot slower on LFR. You get a lot less of them. So here I'm just down timing, smiting away. I haven't even got any atonements out, but really you want to shield on the tank. This was normal level stuff. A few people took hits, so I radianced. Still a while before they hit, so round about now I'm starting to think about, ooh, it's getting close. You can leave it a bit late with darkness because the damage is a bit low, but around about now is when I would normally radiance in HC. Start getting these on. Sometimes you would usually target radiance for people that are taking more damage than others as well, just so the hots on the Shadow Word Pain is doing. So I radiance twice and now I've got 19 atonements out. I schisms, then I penanced, and the Shadow Fiend's out doing all the healing. And that's why my healing just rocketed up like that. Radiance is about to come off, there's quite a few, took some damage, so I'll get another one out of there. Here's an example of a partial ramp up, where I'm just going to get one powered radiance out, the old bit of mend. It's a period where there's some damage going out, and I'm prepping just in case there's a bit more, and you know, I can penance on the move and stuff. But I'm holding all my major stuff back. So here we have the full ramp up. I get balls at about the worst possible time. Regeneration rate is coming up. I get knocked back a lot. I should have already been starting to ramp up to do some shadow mending, then I go into rapturing everybody. Fortunately, a healing CD goes off to keep people up, give salvation. Then I radiance twice.
My ass is gonna die.
That's on 18 now. I just go ham with Schism, Halo.
Really good damage this one. Huge.
And smiting away.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody's good.
Nice.
Collapse. Get moving. Hey.
Run us